As we're walking up here, Tom said that we're going to be increasing in IQ as we go throughout this keynote. That may be debatable, but I can tell you one thing. I have a sneaking suspicion that the comedy level will decrease.
Man, I did not realize how funny Tom was.
He's great.
That's awesome.
He's great. Tough act to follow, and there's two of us. So we're here to talk to you about exactly what you see, real-world examples of significant trends in the commercial drone market. My job is to try and find those trends. Colin and Guinn Partners actually put out a report not too long ago that sort of paralleled a report I put out several months before that, where I talked about trends, but they actually have real-world examples. Many of you may have seen their report. Many of you probably didn't see my report. Theirs was free. But before we get into these trends and the examples of those trends and what we think will be driving our market forward in the future, I want to kind of go through that market evolution as we see it at Frost & Sullivan, and actually developed this with Colin and his team too. But we start here, and we look at the first steps in this market was really a do-it-yourself market where people were buying parts online and making their own drones. And this says 2010 to 2013. Colin will tell you that was before that because he was actually doing things like that before 2010. It was just a random number. 2013 is more definitive because that's really when the market switched over to from the do-it-yourself and just looking specifically at aerial photography and video. In 2013, we see a big market shift because DJI comes out with really what was the first ready-to-fly camera drone, the DJI Phantom 1. Also, you see some regulatory agencies getting into the mix and saying, look, we have this market coming along. What can we do to support it? That's where 2016 comes in, Part 107. Part 107 really delineates that sea change from not being able to do anything commercially with drones without some kind of 333 exemption and a big approval that needs to be done by the FAA to, hey, a quick test, get your drone going, and you can have a business. Also within 2016 to 2019, we start seeing consolidation because so many people rush into this market because it was billions and billions and billions of dollars to be made, so we got to get in. But not everybody succeeded. 2016 to 2019, all those kinds of things happened, but now where are we standing as we all sit here today? We are starting to see, in fact, if you were in any of the briefings from the FAA, you're starting to see on a global basis performance-based regulations, not just you can do this, you can do that, but show me the performance, we'll let you do what you want commercially. Also, we're seeing, and in fact, it was brought up earlier about that Bloomberg article. I promise this was made before that Bloomberg article, but it talks exactly about the same thing, consolidation and accelerating, and VCs saying, okay, we don't want to invest in that stuff anymore because it's not making the money we thought it was going to make. So those are kind of the macro things that are going on now and into the future. We're going to talk more about some micro things. So I am going to talk about real quick each of the trends that we're seeing. That's more of a micro trend. And then Colin's going to give you some real world examples that they've seen when they were developing their report. So the first one is we are really seeing real revenue being achieved by commercial programs, both internal and external. That ROI is being achieved in the field. And so Colin, tell us a couple of examples of that, if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And yeah, thank you guys for having us here. It's an honor, and it's been incredible to watch this industry grow over the last 10 or 12 years into what it is, and never has it been, especially since we did this report, never has it been so evident to me that, you know, the next 10 years is going to be really, really exciting, not just for our flying autonomous robotics, but for autonomy and robotics and kind of value creation in general. So really excited to be here. Also, is Rob Miso in the room? All right, I have his phone. He left it at the security counter. Anyways, we'll find him later. And it may start ringing in my bag because he's been pinging it. Okay, cool. So yeah, we did this report. We've tried to do a report each year that kind of says, hey, this is what we're seeing in the industry. This is what's going on. At Guinn Partners, you know, we kind of sit between the market, you know, people that are adopting drones and trying to figure out how to bring drones into their operations, many of which are global and have, you know, kind of operations across many geographies. And then the companies that are innovating and inventing new technology and finding new ways to generate value. And we kind of sit between those two, and we help translate those stories and those narratives into really clear, understandable value propositions. And we try to, kind of open up revenue lines for our clients that are developing these incredible technologies. And at the same time, we help industry figure out what technologies to adopt so that they can see real ROI. And so in this year's drone report, we really wanted to focus on, hey, let's talk to all of these customers that we've been selling drones to and drone services to for the last 12 years. And let's just have some conversations about what are you guys seeing in the drone space? What got you into using drones? Usually we're talking to the person that runs the drone program or the UAS program at whatever company. And we just kind of wanted to get their stories of like, how long has this taken? I think what I've noticed in the last, 10 years or whatever is like, or especially in the last few years, is that we as an industry, we can all get together at these industry conferences and we can, drink the Kool-Aid and we can talk about how awesome our technology is. And we kind of have this whole conversation going. And then what we realize when we talk to customers that are making the buying decisions of these Fortune 500 companies, they're not really paying attention to our narrative. They're just looking for solutions to do things better, faster, cheaper, safer, more reliably, et cetera. And so it's like two completely separate narratives going on. And, I think, the good part of that is that it doesn't really matter what's happening in our narrative over here. They're looking for solutions. And the bottom line is drones and the amount of wattage that they use to generate incredibly insightful information is just a killer value prop that's not going anywhere. And they all know that. And so we can talk about whatever we want, but they are going to adopt this technology from us or someone else because it just makes sense. And so that's one of the things we really noticed in talking to all of these different program owners at these different companies. So I have just a couple of different excerpts from the report, which is free. We just want to be able to, again, the tenet that we have at our company is just provide value. Whether we're getting on a couple of hour phone call with a young startup that wants some advice of how to engage with the market, whether we're talking to, most of whom are not clients of ours, we just want to provide value because our whole goal is to increase the rate of adoption of this technology into industry. But what we've seen in this latest report, which is really interesting, is a bunch of examples of hard ROI. And there's so many examples of, we did this thing, it saved us $250,000. We were able to use these drone images to go back to subcontractors and work through, hey, were those trenches actually dug in the first place? Turns out they weren't correctly. Okay, miscommunication, we actually don't have to pay you an extra $250,000. You just need to build the trenches that you never built. And there's just so many examples of these, with AES Energy and their partnership with Measure to bring Measure and to help them learn how to fly drones, train their pilots, figure out what types of drones to use. Azel here has been with AES and running their drone program since like 2016, since it was like a science project basically. There's many examples of that where there was kind of a champion of this technology, and it's a multi-year process to go from, hey, and you'll see in a couple slides, people that are like buying the very first Phantom 1 and figuring out how to just get like construction site monitoring. That process takes a while. But what is really promising is that I have yet to talk to a single company or a single one of these programs, literally not one ever, that says, yeah, we thought drones were going to be valuable and we thought there may be something there, so we bought some drones and we put them to work and we collected some data and it turns out they weren't valuable. I mean, we have not heard that one time. Every single company we talk to says, yeah, it's obvious. We can literally spend 2 pennies on electricity and I get this map. So yeah, that's super valuable. And we're going to be using that across all of our geographies around the world. It's going to take some time. And so I think, it's easy for us on this side of the fence to see how possible it is, how easy it is to create this value and want it to just happen instantaneously. And so, yeah, I totally agree with Tom and the fact that, this is going to take a little longer than VCs might like in terms of getting their immediate returns and things like that. And we just have to navigate those waters. But, as you'll see, if you download the report and take a look, we interview companies across industry, and it's all very positive feedback that we're getting from real customers and real companies. But these are a couple examples of that. So they are actually seeing real ROI. That is That is the first trend. That's good news.
Yeah, so with companies actually seeing some ROI, and then now the next step is how do we scale? Not only how do we scale in order to meet requirements in many areas, but how do we scale up within one area to include a large drone fleet? And Colin also has some examples of that.
Yeah, and we'll keep this one really quick. It's kind of a follow-on on the last one. So cool, we did the science project, we got this program going, we bought 1 drone, then we bought 10 drones, then we hired a few pilots. Now, the next, big kind of trend that we saw in doing this report is that time and time again, these companies, and like I said, it takes 2 to 3 years in these big, slow-moving, large organizations with the regulatory environment, changing technology, et cetera, but they're all starting to really grow from a handful of people testing and figuring out if there's ROI to, okay, we've established there is ROI, now let's scale this program. And again, a couple of examples here, but even the one from AES on a couple of slides ago, she was telling us that I think last year they had 60-something pilots. This year they have 175 internal pilots at AES. We're seeing that at Telstra in Australia. They've got, I think, over 100 pilots now. I remember taking solos out there a few years ago and kind of just showing them what a drone could do to inspect a cell phone tower. And now they have over 100 of their own internal pilots, traveling around with drones all day, every day, shooting and keeping people on the ground, or at least figuring out what side of the tower to go up. And so, again, we'll keep this slide quick, but it's essentially these programs internally are going from 1 or 2 drones to 10 drones to 50 drones to hundreds of drones. And, at the same time, there's this new wave of people that are now evaluating the tech for the first time. We're seeing the programs that are being scaled are the programs that really were leading edge because there happened to be somebody in the company 3-4 years ago that saw that these things were coming and that drones were really cool, and maybe they had a Phantom personally, and they were like, hey, we could pop this little drone up and look at the cell phone tower right here. We could inspect the ice bridge or check these transducers, whatever it might be. They were able to use those, and kind of get the company going at a really early stage. Those are the companies that we're seeing really scale, but those were really the very first adopters. But we are seeing that, and that's another big trend.
So automation, we are seeing, we're slowly getting to the point where people are thinking about beyond visual line of sight, people are thinking about flight over people from a regulatory perspective. Industry is much further ahead. We're seeing lots of development and automation, drone in a box, anything that can make things automatic and happen without a pilot in the actual area visually watching these things operate. So Colin actually has some real world examples of those things occurring as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think, these things are flying robots, and as soon as robots are useful, we don't call them robots anymore. We call them a vacuum cleaner, or we call them a drone, or a vehicle. And we see that with drones. And right now, there's such incredible value that can be created with these things that you can have a human in the loop getting paid a lot of money to operate an autonomous robot and still create great returns. But where we are headed, and once regulations, which I agree with Tom, we don't have to wait for regulation. There's a massive industry waiting for us to just generate and deliver value in a repeatable, reliable, safe fashion. But as we're able to start utilizing these autonomous robots as autonomous robots, then the cost of generating that data and generating that intelligence becomes the value proposition is really just becomes ridiculous. And that's going to be over the next few years. But we'll see that everywhere from on the mainstream, what Sunflower Labs has done. I don't know if you know those guys are out of Switzerland. Really interesting model where they're kind of creating this drone in a box solution for homes and for home security. And I don't know how many of you, put it this way, how many of you have not had a friend show you over the last few years, hey, check out my Nest Cam. I can log into my house and see the front door, or I can see the living room, whatever. Like that's just a fun thing that people like to show off. It especially was really popular a few years ago. Well, I think that's just the next version of that is like, check it out. I can pop up and I can, monitor my yard from anywhere. And they're using these really cool vibration sensors in the ground, and they're doing all these AI analytics on a TX2 processor in the little drone station to figure out what kind of movement's happening. So there's a lot of stuff happening in the mainstream and the lower cost. And then industrial applications that are more niche in nature with Percepto and aerobotics, so doing kind of ISR and surveillance applications with EOIR. And then American Robotics is another really cool one. They came out of Carnegie Mellon. They're doing kind of autonomous drone stations for agriculture with multispectral sensors. And they're building the solution very specific to agriculture where they don't have great wireless data and they don't even have good LTE, so they have a kind of a GPU-enabled edge server at the base station that processes the gigabytes and gigabytes worth of data and turns it into a 50 megabyte base map that can be uploaded over LTE. And so these custom solutions are being developed, and I think I don't know if that's a trend or not that we have in our deck, but the fact that drones are getting more and more specific for specific applications, they're becoming less and less one size fits all, especially as people are able to fly them for longer and farther away and collect really specific types of data. We're actually going to be seeing a much wider array of sizes and shapes of drones as people are able to utilize them more and for longer.
Yeah, we only had time for 5 trends, so that would be 6.
Okay.
And
that was a bonus trend.
And the examples Colin gives here are just a few. There's probably 30 to 40 companies out there that are drone-in-a-box companies. So what happens if, for instance, we might have a trade war and we can't get Chinese drones? We don't have any base, industrial base right now that can scale and build small drones for commercial or even military use right now. So if the government went to someone and said, we need 500 drones made for us right now, we can't do it. So there's increasing support in that area to build things here in the US and have that industrial base capability. And Colin has examples of that as well.
Yeah, first of all, on that last slide, FLIR, anybody from FLIR, can I please have a Hornet? I'll make a really cool video about it. That is just the coolest little helicopter. I mean, come on. But no, I think it's hard not to mention, especially with what we're seeing in the news cycles over the last 6 months, that the U.S. government has made it very clear that, and there was a video we put out on LinkedIn about this recently, but essentially the long and short of it is that the U.S. government has designated drones as critical to our national defense and our kind of military industrial complex. And by giving it that designation, it means that drones and drone technology is now eligible for all different kinds of, not just subsidy, but acceleration, non-dilutive R&D money, NRE. It's basically the US government making it clear that we want a lot of this technology being innovated and developed here. And so there's a number of companies, Teal, Skydio, Vantage, Luminaire, Altavian, as well as Parrot, which is in France, but that are all part of the short-range reconnaissance DIU program, where they're getting up to a couple of few $1 million each to try and develop a platoon-level drone. But we're going to be seeing a lot more programs like this out of AFWERX, out of DIU, out of Army Futures Command, and that's something that is definitely a big trend that's happening right now.
All right, our last trend, and again, this is industry preparing for the advancement of rules that allow us to do more with drones and then extended flight time. There are many examples of this. It's not just hybrid, it's also the hydrogen power, like you'll see from Ballard on the show floor. But, and Colin has worked with companies in this very specifically, and I'll let him talk about that as well.
Yeah, so again, as the point of a drone becomes collecting data so that we can analyze that data and draw insights from that data, the longer you can stay up there, the more data that can be collected in an individual single flight, the more efficiency can be gained. And so that image on the last slide, I took that with my phone last week in South Africa with Alti, who's actually the guy that founded SteadyDrone, Duran. And a lot of you guys know from years in the past, SteadyDrone made some great little kind of consumer GoPro quadcopters. They went underground. They've been working on these long endurance VTOLs. And the numbers that they're getting are really pretty staggering. They're little 20-pound, 6-foot wingspan drones flying for like 6 hours. And then they have their mid-size is still an SUAS. It's like 40 pounds. It flies for like 12 hours. And then they have a big one that's like 180 pounds. I can't remember the wingspan, but the thing is massive. And it's flying for 30 hours. So they've got these really long endurance drones. And I think that's something that, and those are runway, what's it called when you don't need a runway? one of those things. Runway independent, runway, whatever. So you don't need a runway. It's a VTOL, which is sweet, and it flies for anywhere from 6 to 30 hours. Another really cool development is Doosan, who is a very large energy company in South Korea, came to us a couple years ago and said, hey, we want to take our hydrogen fuel cell stack, these little 1,000-watt stacks, and create a drone that can fly with them. And so, we just had this come out recently, but now you have a drone that's a SUAS, so falls under 55 pounds, and it flies on compressed hydrogen gas, and it'll fly for 2 to 3 hours. And it's really, really quiet. It's a low vibration environment, just like electric. You're not having to mess with carburetors or maintain an internal combustion engine. And they're building out this whole network where they're taking and delivering hydrogen tanks to all their industrial clients. And this is a company that owns Bobcat, and they own Doosan Heavy Equipment. They sell big tractors. So they're really seeing these things as being used as industrial equipment that is going to be used day in and day out, and that's how they're developing this. And so that's and of course what Spencer's doing in Impossible Aerospace, Top Flight, we've got a bunch of companies out there that are developing these really innovative long endurance drones, and that's something that I think we're going to see, again, more and more of over the next couple of years.
All right, we're a minute over, so Colin, close us out quick.
And that's the conclusion. Yeah, so we're transitioning from being managed by drone enthusiasts to being managed by subject matter experts. So we're like Tom said, instead of drone people trying to create a business, it's business people trying to create an industry. We will continue to experience slow, steady growth. I think at some point, the growth is going to, there's going to be a tipping point like we saw in the consumer drone space when we launched the Phantom 1, because there was no barrier to delivering the demand that existed. And that'll happen, when the time is right from a regulatory perspective. And then advances in technology will drive growth by reducing the amount of time it takes to turn data into decisions. So that's, a kind of a nod to, we talk about autonomy a lot, but one word that I'll leave you with that we see time and time again from the market is workflow. What is the overall total workflow of operating this flying robot and turning it into valuable data? And a big part of that is that you're utilizing autonomy throughout the process, but even if you have a fully autonomous system, there's still a workflow involved with getting that thing to the site, building the initial mission, doing all of that. So how easy is that workflow? How repeatable is it? And how easy is it to train a non-drone professional to do that workflow? But yeah, that's it. We're only 2 minutes over.
That's all.
Not bad.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Hand it off.